There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
George Bernard Shaw once wrote, "Some people see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?"
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the Democratic way. And now your host, Stephen Hanks.
Listening right now on this July 27th, 2024 through KAZM 106.5 FM and 780 AM Mellow Mountain Radio. My name is Stephen Hanks, and this radio show, which launched last Saturday morning at 8 a.m., is called The Patriotic Progressive, for truth, justice, and the Democratic way. And I also want to welcome folks from all over Arizona and around the country who may be tuning into the live stream on mellowmountainradio.com, and anyone who is listening to the podcast version on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Folks, I had a opening prepared for the show today, which I basically had to tear up late last night when I heard some news come across social media. There is one snippet of a speech that happened last night that I guarantee you will not ever be attached to those iconic speeches that you heard at the beginning of my show from immortal Democratic candidates. This is what was said at a Christian nationalist white supremacist meeting in West Palm Beach last night by the current Republican presidential candidate. And I quote, "Christians, get out and vote. Just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. You know what? 4 more years. It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm Christian. I love you. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you won't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good, you're not going to have to vote." That, my friends, is the Republican presidential candidate, the pathological lying sociopath, Donald Trump, who not only talks about being a dictator on day one if he's elected, but based on that comment, which I'm sure today and tomorrow he's going to say, "Oh, I was only joking. I was being sarcastic. You can't take it seriously." I guarantee you he'll be a dictator for as long as he can stay alive. Folks, I am livid right now. In fact, when I heard about this last night, I had to double up on my blood pressure medication this morning. The good news about this, even as angry as I am, which, by the way, followed being pretty ecstatic over the developments on the Democratic side over the last week. But this is just, if there's any Republicans or conservatives out there who have been leaning toward Donald Trump, if that statement is not a deal breaker in terms of who you're going to vote for, you should all be ashamed of yourselves. Don't ever call yourselves patriots. Don't ever call yourselves people that obey the Constitution. That is what your candidate is saying. Now, I have a feeling that one of the reasons he said something like that, and knowing he was going to get all the attention about it, was because he just felt like he was overshadowed all this week by his equally deranged vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, who has been saying things about women that should totally have him taken off the ticket. But, maybe he should stay on. Donald Trump has a tendency to shoot himself in the foot when it comes to making decisions about politics. I think you can hear in my voice how outraged I am over this. But this is nothing new. The Republican Party for decades has been the party of voter suppression and voter nullification. And this is just Donald Trump taking it to what the right wing feels is its logical conclusion. So, folks, I'll calm down. I promise I'll calm down. With the Arizona primary coming up on Tuesday, if talking about switching gears, I definitely wanted to spend some time this morning discussing some of the local races involving the Democrats and offering my endorsements. And we're also going to have some special guests later in the show, the 3 Democratic candidates running for seats on the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is relatively obscure to many voters here, but is a very important and underrated part of our state government. All that will come in the second half of today's show. But I had to begin this episode of the Patriotic Progressive with a few thoughts about the new political landscape we're in right now. So, can you believe the past few weeks we've had in politics? Folks, I've been a political junkie for going on 60 years, and I hate dating myself. And that what we've experienced since the night of that Biden-Trump debate has been positively surreal. One of the reasons I didn't want to talk much on my first show last Saturday about the shooting at the Trump rally or the craziness going on in the Biden campaign was because my political instincts were telling me that President Biden was going to bow out of the campaign, and I was truly on the fence about whether or not I wanted him to. And then Sunday afternoon, last Sunday, Biden made his campaign-changing announcement, and it's been a wild ride for the Democrats in the country the entire past week. The excitement and energy for Vice President Kamala Harris to be the first woman president, and a black woman at that, has been off the charts since President Biden endorsed her last Sunday afternoon. The amount of money raised and the endorsements have been unprecedented and have totally turned this race around. Almost every group you can think of has been holding Zoom meetings, raising money, and volunteers for Kamala Harris from black college sororities, black women, white women, LGBTQ groups. In fact, on Monday night, this Patriotic Progressive will be attending a Zoom meeting entitled White Dudes for Harris. I don't quite have my White Dudes for Harris baseball cap yet, but I've ordered it. Folks, every once in a while, I do one of those Facebook live videos with a few minutes of political commentary. And about 2 weeks ago, I talked about how no matter how many people love Joe Biden and wanted him to stay in the race, being a lifelong observer of both politics and sports, I have a pretty good feel about momentum. The big Mo, as they call it. And my instincts were telling me that momentum was obviously heading toward President Biden leaving the race. Now I'm sensing a new big Mo, and movement that is pointing to Kamala Harris passing Trump on these last laps of the race to the November election. And all I can say is, thank heaven. Perhaps we have a shot at actually saving this democratic system and keeping a convicted felon, adjudicated racist, and pathological lying sociopath and his Project 2025 extremists from destroying this democracy. And by the way, in future shows, I'll be having in-depth conversation with some really patriotic progressive guests, and among other things, we'll be talking about the draconian Project 2025, which is actually the 1930s Germany Nuremberg laws on steroids. But right now, I'm going to switch gears again and briefly talk about the Arizona primaries coming up on Tuesday. Folks, I'm a proud member of the Democrats of the Red Rocks here in Sedona. In fact, I was voted onto the board as soon as I moved to the village of Oak Creek, which was 3 years ago this weekend. And DOOR, as it's called, has endorsed Democrats for the various federal, statewide, and local offices that I'm on board with, and I want to go through a few of them with you right now, especially if you're still deciding who you'll vote for on Tuesday at your polling location or in a drop box in your area. So on the federal side, this one's easy. Ruben Gallegos, the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senator. In November, he'll likely be running against Kerry Lake, a total, I don't know what you can call her. I better not say it because we're on the air and my bosses here might get in trouble. But so Ruben Gallegos, the man. For the Congressional District 2 U.S. Representative, Jonathon Nez, a Native American, is running alone, and when he is the nominee, he'll be running in November against the totally toxic Eli Crane, who is a complete Trumper, insurrectionist. A lot of people praise Eli Crane, including a talk show host that has a show on this station, about how Eli Crane is tremendous because he speaks to his constituents. He works with his constituents. The only reason why that's happening is because the Arizona Redistricting Commission changed the district, which redistricted Tom O'Halloran out. Eli Crane was able to win by about 7 to 8 points. And I guarantee you, if he had won that election by a few hundred votes, he wouldn't be so quick to listen to all the things that his right-wing Republican constituents tell him. For the state legislature, Legislative District 1, you need to vote for Mike Fogel as state senator and Jay Ruby and Marcia Smith as the state representatives. You can vote for 2 of them. In the city of Sedona, my endorsement goes to current Mayor Scott Jablow. For the city council, Kathy Kinsella, Holly Plug, and Derek Paff. For the Yavapai County Supervisor District 3, please vote for Nikki Check over the incumbent Donna Michaels. And that's in Coconino County. There are 6 big races: county assessor, county attorney, county recorder, school superintendent, county supervisor District 3, and county treasurer. Just vote for the Democrats all the way down the line, and you'll be doing yourself well. So I saved the statewide race for last because my 3 guests today are Democratic candidates for the 3 open seats on the Arizona Corporation Commission. Now, if like many people in the area, you don't quite know what this very important body is responsible for, I'm going to tell you. Among other things, the Arizona Corporation Commission regulates several hundred public utilities in the area, like APS, serving the state, including setting the rates and charges for service and ensuring adequate, reliable service. It registers securities dealers and salesmen. The ACC registers corporations and limited liability companies and enforces regulations to ensure railroad and pipeline safety. The authors of the Arizona Constitution created this commission in 1912 as an agency independent of the legislature, the executive branch, or the judiciary. The commission is an unusual public entity in that only a handful of other states have constitutionally formed commissions. Then as now, the goal was to have an agency that could balance the enormous economic power wielded by large corporations, such as the railroads of that era, with the needs of ordinary citizens. The commission is headed by 5 commissioners. This is important to know. Each commissioner serves a 4-year term with the ability to serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. In case of a vacancy, the governor appoints a replacement of the same political party as the outgoing commissioner. Right now, the ACC's 5 members include 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans. Now, there are 3 open seats this year, and the 3 Democrats on the ballot, pretty much running as a team, are my guests on today's show. So we're going to tell you a little bit about Joshua Polacheck, Ylenia Aguilar, and Jonathon Hill. Joshua Polacheck is a third-generation union member and former commissioned Foreign Service officer. A native of Tucson, Joshua is running for the Arizona Corporation Commission to fight for affordable, reliable, and secure utilities for every single person in this state. He served almost 20 years as a commissioned Foreign Service officer with the U.S. Department of State. He's third generation in his family to serve the country. His overseas tours included Mosul in northern Iraq, Pakistan, Lebanon, Zimbabwe, and the Dominican Republic. Ylenia Aguilar was born in Mexico and became a U.S. citizen in 2014 after growing up in Arizona and cultural Illinois. She was elected to the Central Arizona Project Board, which manages delivery of the Colorado River water to Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties. Currently, she is Business Development Manager with Jibe, I believe it's called Jibe, a company that helps organizations optimize watershed health. Jonathon Hill was born in Kingman and raised in Phoenix, and he's lived, studied, and worked in Tempe since 2000. Passionate about space exploration since childhood, Jonathon earned degrees in, get this, aerospace engineering, geological sciences, and Russian from Arizona State University. A man after my own heart. He studied Russian, culminating in the defense of his PhD in geological sciences in 2022. For the past 18 years, Jonathon has worked as an engineer and scientist at the Arizona State University Mars Space Flight Facility, operating ASU's camera on NASA's Mars Odyssey spacecraft and ASU's instruments on the Spirit and Opportunity Mars rovers. He has also worked on the University of Arizona's Asteroid Sample Return Mission, NASA's Europa Clipper mission, and the Lucy mission to the Trojan asteroids. These are three very impressive people, and I just want to say one thing about Ylenia. If Donald Trump and his white supremacists were running the country, it might have been really hard for Ylenia to come to this country. But she was able to, and look what she's accomplished. So these are three impressive people. You should all support them in this run for the Arizona Corporation Commission. I'm still really wound up about that Trump speech, so you'll have to forgive me. My producer, Ryan Thompson's looking at me, shaking his head, like, you got to calm down, boy. You got a show to do today. But you can understand how I'm going to pull it together, because we now want to do this interview with the three candidates for the Arizona Corporation Commission. So, Joshua, let's start with you.
Yeah.
I just outlined for the audience a little bit about what the Arizona Corporation Commission is. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to start, have you elaborate, and Jonathon and Ylenia can chime in as well, on what your perception is of the Corporation Commission. I want each of you to tell us why you're running, and also why it's so important to the state of Arizona who is in these jobs.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this office that is really what we call the most powerful office that nobody's ever heard of in this state.
Exactly.
It directly oversees 10% of the Arizona economy, and it's going to determine the future of our state, not just in power, but in telecoms and in water. We're really talking about a legacy here. Mm-hmm. And we've been going around the state with the state Democratic Party doing town halls, and we're going to go to every single county in the state. We've been to 2. We've got 4 more in the coming week. And this is the question that we always get asked. Why are you running for this?
Right. How many times have you had to answer this so far?
I'm not keeping track. Jonathon's got a great line. I'll let him deliver that line about, what you grow up thinking. But for me, this race is really about legacy. When you went over my career in the Foreign Service and you talked about the places I served, I didn't go to London or Tokyo or Moscow. I was going to places where the work that I did would have an extra meaning, would have an extra impact. And this is my first political race. And I'm doing this because I am worried about the future that we are leaving to our children and our grandchildren. We are making decisions with the Corporation Commission that are going to have legacy impacts, not just for 5 years, not just for 10 years, but for 50 and 60 years down the line. We are going to be deciding if Arizona is going to have energy independence, or we are going to be dependent on out-of-state fossil fuels for generations, decades to go. And we have an opportunity to deliver affordable and reliable power to our citizens, our ratepayers, if we pick this path. And just yesterday, I was at the Rural Electrical Co-op annual or biannual convention. I was sitting there on a panel with the 3 Republicans and me, and they kept talking about, like, oh, there's this climate agenda, and we need to, make sure that we keep using all these sources. And what they're really talking about is they're trying to force the utilities to keep using antiquated 1800s technology because they are in the pocket of out-of-state fossil fuels. And instead of building on the energy independence that we have here in Arizona, this possibility of breaking free of the dirty, expensive, and unreliable ways that we did it in the past, they're so afraid of change. And, they're also in the pocket of this $5 billion a year out-of-state fossil fuels that they're selling our future down the river. And for me, it's about legacy.
I hear you. Before we started this discussion, I talked a little bit about what the various races are in the primaries, including the 3 of you who are running for the Democratic seats on the commission. And I also met all 3 of you a number of weeks ago at the Democrats of the Red Rocks breakfast, and I was extremely impressed with all of you. And I'm endorsing all of you. I just want to make that public.
We appreciate that.
I really hope you guys end up on that commission. So, Jonathon, I want you and Ylenia both also to talk about what's motivated you to run for this position, how you feel about it. Ylenia, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for this opportunity. We're grateful for any opportunity to be able to talk about why we're running and how important this race is, not just for, our communities, but our entire state. So I know Joshua covered a lot of why it's important, but I wanted to share why I'm running. I have been serving for the past almost 9 years. And I started very, very local with the school board, and then I currently serve on the Water Conservation Board. And those are the issues and my priorities, right? Like in this role, I think that besides, the monopolies that we regulate, water is one of the most important ones. We can't exist in the state without reliable water and reliable and electricity. So this is something that I know has been impacting communities like mine. I grew up in poverty, so I can relate to the experiences of many Arizona families, especially those families living in rural Arizona, who are experiencing not only the impacts in their pockets, where you're having to decide, do I pay for what is more important, my medication or like my utility bills, or should I buy food? So those are the conversations that are happening right now in our community. And as someone who has been serving, I've served in nonpartisan roles, and I know, what it takes to work across party lines to get things done. But in this board, I feel like it's going to be extremely challenging. But I will, we'll continue to work hard and ensure that we get what is. We need to ensure that we protect our rates for all Arizonans, and these rates do not continue to go up. We need to ensure that we have, like I mentioned before, like safe, reliable, not only just electricity, but water, and that we are a voice for our communities. One of the important roles that the ACC has is during the summer and the winters. I know that you guys may not experience this like we are experiencing in Maricopa County, where people are dying from extreme heat and their ACs going out in their homes, is like the extreme cold weather as well. And we know that utilities can't disconnect, but we have the responsibility to ensure that those utilities have programs and that they are tracking and they have mechanisms in place so families don't continue to suffer and die as a result. So that is something that I really care deeply about as an advocate in our community, and I will continue to do this. Thank you. That
sounds great. Jonathon, I remember when you showed up at the Democrats of the Red Rocks breakfast. You were there in person, and your cohorts were on a Zoom meeting. And I remember when, I don't know if you remember this comment that I made, but when you were going through your background in aerospace engineering and geological sciences and various connections with NASA, I remember saying, you shouldn't be running for office. You should be doing a reboot of The Big Bang Theory. So that said, what is your motivation for doing this? How did you get involved? And explain a little bit about the Clean Slate group that you guys call yourself and you're running as part of, and just what your take is on the whole election this year.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us again, and thanks for letting me call in. I'm a little under the weather at the moment. But yeah, so I'm approaching this from sort of a unique perspective. As you said, my background is in engineering and science. I've spent the last 18 years working at ASU on a number of Mars missions. So primarily the cute little Spirit and Opportunity rovers that look like WALL-E from the Pixar movie. Mm-hmm. But I've also done some Mars orbiters, worked on 2 asteroid missions, and then working on a Jupiter mission that's getting ready to launch right now. And, that might seem kind of, why would you want to change tracks and run for something like the Corporation Commission? Well, I've always been a big believer that more people with STEM backgrounds should run for public office. And I think that's especially true with the commission, which is regulating, these huge energy distribution grids, water distribution grids. And I think having an engineer on that board would be beneficial and would help the commission as a whole make better decisions. So as you said, I started out almost 20 years ago now working on these NASA missions on the engineering side. But over time, I sort of fell in love with the geology work that our missions were doing, primarily on Mars. And so halfway through my career, I kind of switched tracks and went from doing a master's in aerospace engineering to doing a master's and then a PhD in geology. And so that's also expertise that I would really like to bring to the commission is, so many of our rural water companies rely purely on groundwater to serve their customers. And so I think having someone on the commission that has geologic background, knows how to read geologic maps, understands how groundwater moves, would really help make sure that we manage our aquifers properly so they not only serve our customers now, but can continue serving customers for the foreseeable future. So
that's great. One of the things that people in this Sedona and the Verde Valley, and I would imagine all over Arizona, are very sensitive to is the APS and, them supplying energy for everyone. Almost everybody uses them, I assume. So I remember in doing the research that the Arizona Corporation Commission, who has 5 members, and right now it's 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans.
That's correct.
Right. They approved the APS rate hikes. Joshua, tell us a little bit about that and how big an issue that is for you guys going into this.
Well, the Corporation Commission is elected to make sure that you, the ratepayers, have somebody in charge of these monopolies that you don't have a choice about using.
Right.
And I will make a pledge right now here on the radio, and I believe my teammates will join in, that at the very minimum, we will do the basic job, which is reading the since we're on radio, I'm not going to get you an FEC violation, but reading the actual rate case before we vote for it.
Right.
The current majority on the Corporation Commission, as exemplified by Chairman O'Connor when the APS rate case went before them, and he was asked by a reporter with the Capital Times, I believe, but asked by a reporter after the rate case, what about this provision in the rate case? And he said, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I didn't even read the rate case because I knew I was going to vote for it. Mm-hmm. I will make a pledge that we will actually read these rate cases and know that, because we've been seeing, I was just out in Quartzsite with Ylenia a couple of weeks ago, and people are looking at their bills. The APS, they have APS out there in eastern Arizona. It was supposed to be a 10% rate increase on schools, small businesses, and homes, 4% rate increase on large industrial customers. Mm-hmm. People are seeing their bills going up 18, 19, 20, 25% year on year. Yeah. And this has been happening year on year ever since the Republicans have gone from having a Republican majority in the teens about 10 years ago to having a Trump-inspired MAGA majority on the Corporation Commission for the last, especially the last year and a half, but really over the last 5 years. And it's just been, we've seen that they're not even in the pockets of the utilities at this point. Right. They're in the pockets of out-of-state fossil fuels. And the utilities are like, well, if we can get record profits out of that, that's great. And we're seeing that. You're seeing record profits with APS, TEP, and UNIS. But you're also seeing that the utilities are getting forced by the Corporation Commission to build unnecessary fossil fuel infrastructure that we're going to be saddled with until 2090, and being kept from building more reliable, more affordable, energy secure, and energy independent clean energy infrastructure. And we are losing tens of thousands of jobs in Arizona because the Corporation Commission would rather play politics with our essential utilities than allow the free market to function and let the people of this state build that clean energy infrastructure. Yeah, yeah. If you were at that breakfast at Red Rocks, there's a Lutheran church in the area that was deep into going energy independent. Following their biblical stricture of taking care of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. They were ready to go build a pretty massive solar plus battery parking lot structure. APS was on board as a partner. They were, ready to sign the check with the contractors. And APS sends them an email out of the blue after the Corporation Commission takes a vote to kill any support for an efficiency and energy independence program, and said, sorry, the program's over. Good luck. You can build it, but, we're not going to partner with you. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, and any of you can chime in on this. So in my personal situation in my home in the village of Oak Creek, APS was the provider, but I put solar panels on the roof. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, I assume any company that you get solar panels from, you get a credit from APS on the bill. Are those credits as much as they should be? Do you find that there's any shenanigans going on between, with APS and their consumers when it comes to getting the benefit of getting the solar panels, as far as you know? And how are they dealing with that? Are they trying to discourage people in the community from doing solar, or how's that working? So it doesn't work into their bottom line, right? Right. I'll pass it. Ylenia and Jonathon are pretty good experts on this as well. But for them, when people build rooftop solar, that's good for the grid, right? Right. You're building resiliency. You're having somebody else basically build a mini power plant at their own home that when the grid is stressed, that can help provide stability to the grid. Mm-hmm. But they don't get the profits out of that. And also, you're removing a need to build large centralized fossil fuel infrastructure, large methane plants, because every few hundred kilowatts that somebody builds on the rooftop solar is few hundred kilowatts that the grid doesn't need. And which is less of a demand to build these massive projects that we're going to be saddled with for years.
Right. Jonathan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so the Corporation Commission, directly approves what those net metering rates are. And as you implied, there are rate cases before the commission right now to lower what people receive for putting excess solar power onto the grid during peak hours. And I think that's the wrong approach because it's, as you alluded to, it's disincentivizing something that we should be incentivizing.
Well, and also, just not to interrupt you, but also, I remember when my wife and I made the decision to do solar panels with the company that we hired, the big pitch on their part was how much we were going to save off of our APS bill because we were going to get credits. So you're saying that they're actively working to try to minimize those.
Right, and just like you, people use that net metering rate when they do the initial calculations to see if they can financially afford to put one of these solar power systems on their homes. And so to come back afterwards and change the rate really messes with their calculations and could put some people into a rough spot with, paying off the loans that they took to build that solar power infrastructure.
Right. Ylenia, I want to ask you, so as I mentioned before, there's on the commission right now, there's 5 members, 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans. I think there are a couple of people not running again. So there's 3 Democrats on the ballot, the 3 of you, and there are 3 open seats. So assuming you guys all win, and we hope you do, is that going to basically flip the commission to 4 Democrats and 1 Republican? And are there any Republicans running?
Actually, current Commissioner Tobad is not running for re-election. So when all 3 of us win, that is enough to flip. We need 3 votes on a 5-member board in order to get anything done. So we do know that one of the current commissioners incumbent is running for re-election. Mm-hmm. So, but regardless of that, we all feel pretty optimistic about this race. And when we all win, I think this is going to give us the advantage to change the things that need to change. Currently, you were talking about rate cases, so we know that our bills are way too high, and these cases are resulting in price shocks, so we need to change that. And usually when there are bill increases, there's often proposed, a second proposed rate increase. And we know that there are others to come from some of the utility companies. And we know that people are struggling to cope with the increases in energy costs. I talked about it earlier during my introduction. So we need families need improvements in the proposed energy and support programs in these rate cases, and even minimal decreases to rate cases are not enough. Our ratepayers only care about the total amount that rates are going up, and they're way too high. So we can have an impact in that. We can have an impact in many other areas as well, but I think just getting us elected and in those seats will be the beginning of a transformation for the future of Arizona, and for the best interest. And we're talking about quality of life. We're talking about electricity and water. This is to improve people's quality of life and give them a chance just to exist in the state. So that's how important this is. And obviously this is important because it will also ensure that we do have an Arizona and a planet that our future generations can exist in. So very critical. A lot of this is policy driven, to understand what's happening and the policies currently in place and how we can make a difference as a 3-member Democrat board. Right. So yeah.
So this is, I guess, a question for all 3 of you. Any of you can chime in. So there's a chance, we hope this happens, that the Arizona legislature could flip to the Democrats this year. It's very, very close right now with the Republicans in control. My question is, How do you view our Democratic governor handling issues that involve climate and all the things you've been talking about? And how much interaction does the Corporation Commission have with the governor and the state legislature once they're seated?
Well, the current Corporation Commission, we have to be clear, is incredibly hostile to both the governor and to our national federal government. How
has that manifested itself?
We're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in the infrastructure or in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Build Back Better infrastructure bill that could have been coming to Arizona to be building a clean energy infrastructure that would have brought good union jobs to Maricopa, to Pima, to Pinell, to Yavapai, to every single county in this state, building out these solar power plants, building out the transmission lines, building out the wind infrastructure, revitalizing our infrastructure, our energy infrastructure. And instead, they are completely hostile to that. They've been talking about repealing the Green New Deal, which doesn't exist. They've been talking about and have put regulations in place that keep these private-public partnerships from being manifested, from keeping this federal investment out of our state. And it's going to other states.
So they've just outright rejected the money that was targeted for Arizona?
Well, they've done it in a very sly way. They've made it unprofitable for the investor-owned utilities to take this federal money. And you've seen the co-ops, you've seen Native Renewables up in the northeast corner in Navajo country and Hopi land. You've seen the Gila River community accept these dollars, and you're seeing these hundreds of millions of dollars, amazing infrastructure improvements, bringing solar battery technology to these communities, seeing upgrades to our transmission infrastructure. But for the rest of Arizona, for the people that do not have the tribal sovereignty to be able to build that themselves, the Corporation Commission is standing in the way.
Jonathon, if you guys flip the commission to Democratic control, but the legislature doesn't flip to Democrats, are you going to run into roadblocks from the Republican legislature? And what would be the difference if the Democrats did take over the state house?
Well, this is one sort of interesting dynamic about the commission is that a lot of people will refer to it informally as Arizona's fourth branch of government because of how much power it has. And in many ways, it operates completely separately of the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. It's been entrusted with overseeing and regulating the monopolies in the state, which are now primarily the utilities. And those decisions are, in most cases, not reviewable by the other branches of government. And so, when you mentioned climate issues, in Arizona, when it comes to climate issues, the rubber hits the road at the Corporation Commission. So even if we flip one or both houses of the state legislature and we have obviously control of the executive branch, if we don't have control of the Corporation Commission, we're still not going to be able to make progress on these issues.
Right.
But as Ylenia said, if we do take a majority on the commission, regardless of what happens elsewhere in Arizona government, we can still make progress on these issues.
Yeah. And I just want to make one small a friendly correction to my teammate Jonathon. It's not if we take control of the commission, it's when we take control of the commission.
There you go. Jonathon.
Because what they are offering, I just spent an hour listening to them yesterday at the Rural Co-op. They are offering more of the same. There are articles in oil and gas trade magazines talking about them continuing the policies of the current Corporation Commission. This agenda of jack the rates up, drill baby drill, and keep us locked into, we talk about the Republicans wanting to take us back to 1864 with regard to reproductive freedom. They want to keep us in 1894, which is when the first gas turbine power plant got brought on board. They want to keep us in 1894 with how we do our power in this state.
Right. Well, that's the third thing on Donald Trump's agenda, beyond being a dictator on day one and giving more tax breaks to the rich, is drill baby drill. That's what he says at every rally. So, Jonathon, You have your rhetorical marching orders from your teammate now. So, I'm glad Joshua brought up, alluded to some national politics, because I have to ask you guys, especially given what the surreal situation that's happened over the last week or so, maybe 3 weeks since that apocryphal debate, and this just happened over the weekend. Ylenia, I want to start with you because our next president of the United States is going to be a woman. What was your reaction to everything that happened over the weekend, and how do you feel about Kamala Harris and what the campaign has in store for us?
Well, what I will say is that our current president, President Biden, and VP Harris have done more for this country than any other president.
Here, ditto.
And I am really happy and content with all of their policies and all of the work that they've been doing in many areas. But we are here to talk about the commission. So for me, I would like to talk about what they've done with making Arizona. We could be, becoming one of the clean energy economic powerhouses of the nation. We need to ensure that we stand behind VP Harris and get her elected. We are moving in the right direction in that sense.
Yeah.
They have, thanks to her and President Biden, Arizona has almost added, I think, approximately 13,000 clean energy jobs in the past year. I think this is the seventh most among states. So I applaud the current administration, and that includes her, and we need to support her. I believe in democracy. I come from a country where, actually, interestingly enough, we already elected a woman as a president, right, but where there isn't justice. There's so many injustices, and I believe in this country. I believe in the American dream. It's worked out for me. I want it to work out for so many other Americans as well, and I believe the only way to get there is by supporting VP Harris. She is an incredibly talented woman with not only, the credentials she needs, but she has the experience as well, and she's been doing the work already. We just need to support her so she can win and we can continue on this energy. They have done more for this planet than any other president. They have done more for when we were at this event, and I believe it was Safford, there was a woman who told me, I wouldn't have my teeth if it weren't for, Biden and Harris. These are little things that you hear on the road, and they just make my heart full because these are real people. These are real issues, real challenges. We're talking about women's rights. We're talking about democracy. We're talking about our future generations, and you can't compete. This man is the opposition. Right. I won't even mention his name. He's disgusting. He's a criminal. All of us, especially people of color, we are set at a higher bar. We cannot, if we committed any type of crime, we wouldn't be in these positions, but he gets to get away with anything.
Right. I just have a couple. Thanks.
We are set.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just have a couple of minutes left. Jonathon, there's a possibility that the vice presidential running mate could be a current sitting senator from Arizona. You never know, and that could help take the state. Just really quick, what was your take on the whole, all the events over the weekend?
Like Ylenia said, I think we have a great we had a great nominee for president, and I think we still have a great nominee for president. Absolutely. I'm also really glad that the uncertainty around the issue has been cleared up, just so that as a party we can move forward and continue making progress. And I'll just add that, despite the obvious unexpected, a lot of developments happening up at the top of the ticket, it's really important for people to remain focused on the local issues. Those down ballot races, their city council.
Oh, absolutely.
Their county board of supervisors, the corporation commission, because those are going to make the local differences. that people are going to see in their everyday lives. And so it's good for people to not lose focus that, we have obviously really high priorities at the top of the ticket, but we have high priorities further down the ticket as well.
Absolutely. So, Joshua, in the minute or so we have left, why don't you chime in on your feelings about everything?
Yeah, so I'm a delegate, elected delegate from my congressional district. I was a strong supporter of the Biden-Harris.
I am so jealous of you. I would love to be there too.
And I was we'll see. I think it's going to be a really interesting and energetic time. I was a strong supporter of the Biden-Harris ticket, and I'm now a strong supporter of the Harris. Sorry, I almost said Harris-Kelly ticket. The Harris ticket. And I think we have an opportunity right now to show such a clear contrast between somebody who, in her own words, has taken on fraudsters and sexual offenders, and she knows Donald Trump's type, and she knows how to handle those sorts of people.
Absolutely.
And I am so proud. You're sitting in, as we're sitting here in studio, you can see I've got a Kamala button on. I was a supporter of hers in 2019. I have been a strong supporter of what she is bringing to national politics. And I've got this story that we met her, my daughter and I met her in 2020 at a rally in Tucson, COVID rally. We were in cars. And this is the thing, like, we have to remember 4 years ago what the final horrible chapter of the Trump presidency was.
Yep.
Was tens of thousands of people sick every day, hundreds, if not thousands of people dying from a global pandemic that he completely messed up.
Yep.
Intentionally. And we're at this car rally, where you meet the candidates. We were separated by 6 feet, and my daughter was on my shoulders in her Girl Scout uniform. And then candidate Harris was going through and waving at people. She stopped with us, did not look at me at all, looked straight at my daughter and said, "Honey, I was a Girl Scout too, and I'm doing this so that one day you can be president." And I just think back to that moment, and I am so incredibly proud. And, people are tearing up in the studio right now, and I cannot wait for the opportunity to vote for her virtually. I will be nominating her as one of the hopefully first 300 people to nominate her to be our next president. And I am so looking forward to going to Chicago, and we are going to rally and unify behind one of our strongest candidates in decades.
Absolutely. And I love you finishing with that story, because not only your daughter's going to remember that for the rest of her life, and I'll tell you why. When I was 10 years old and growing up in the Bronx, Bobby Kennedy was running for the Senate from New York. It was 1966 campaign. I managed to get to the front of a flatbed truck in the Bronx while he was giving a speech. I shimmied my way up to the front of the truck, and he reached over and shook my hand. And I still remember that to this day like it was yesterday. So I thank you for that story, and I thank all of you for being on the show today. That's Joshua Polacheck, Ylenia Aguilar, and Jonathon Hill, who are running for the Democratic seats for the Arizona Corporation Commission. Get out and vote. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, make sure when you get your ballot in October, or if you vote in person in November, you have 3 votes.
3 votes. Exactly.
The ballot, the Republicans changed the ballot to make it a little sketchier, where it said you can vote for up to 3, and it's in small italics. You have 3 votes. There are 3 seats on the commission. Control of the commission is on the ballot this cycle. You have to use your 3 votes if you want to see a true future, a legacy future here in Arizona.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate the time. You've heard it, folks. Get out there and vote for these 3 amazing, incredibly talented and intelligent people. And I wish you all the best of luck in the primary and in the election. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Thanks very much.
I'm Smokey Bear, and I made an assistant to help you prevent wildfires.
Dude, I've got this. I've been camping since I was 5 years old.
But I am a camping influencer.
You know what? I'll bet you $5. Assistant Smokey, what is the best way to put out a campfire?
To put out a campfire, drown with water, stir, drown again. Then make sure the fire is out cold by feeling with the back of your hand.
Wait, really?
I'll take the $5.
Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hello, Sedona. Stephen Hanks here, host of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks. Now at a new time, 10 to 11 a.m. on Saturday. My in-studio guests this week will be photographers Dawn Kish and Larry Lindahl and fine art photo printer Richard Jackson, all talking about documenting Utah's incredible Glen Canyon. That's Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, 10 to 11 a.m. on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio. Well, my friends, that's it for today's Patriotic Progressive. And by the way, you know, some of my baby boomer friends who have been listening to the show hear that slogan for truth, justice, and the democratic way. They say to me, that sounds like the line from The Adventures of Superman TV show from the 1950s. Well, I'm certainly not comparing myself to Superman, although my name is Stephen. So I suppose I could come into the studio wearing a costume with a big S on my chest. But be that as it may, many thanks to my producer in the booth, Ryan Thompson. As usual, tune in again next Saturday morning from 8 to 9 when I'll be talking about the results of the Arizona primaries and a lot more about the national political landscape, hopefully with a surprise guest. And remember, you can live stream our show on mellowmountainradio.com and hear the podcast version on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. And at 10 a.m. this morning, please tune in to Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks when our topic will be phenomenal photography, documenting Glen Canyon in photos and on film, with my special in-studio guests, Flagstaff-based conservation photographer Dawn Kish and her colleagues, photographer Larry Lindahl from Sedona and photography printer Richard Jackson from Flagstaff. That's going to be a fascinating conversation, not only about the work they do in photography, but about the film that was created about Glen Canyon, which was phenomenal. Thanks for listening, everyone, to the Patriotic Progressive for truth, justice, and the democratic way. Have a great week, everyone.